Good evening and welcome to the anniversary edition of Time to Face the Facts. 1 year ago, we started this program and certainly want to thank those of you who have kept with us and as we continue to improve the program. This evening, we're going to ask the question, is parliamentary democracy in the Caribbean threatened? Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a moment. I'm Jerry George. Don't go away.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place, CariVision, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel and festivals. Advertise on the CariVision platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CariVision, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
Welcome back. This evening, we're going to look at a subject that I trust will interest you, as it has interested us. We have 3 islands of the region that we can look at as case studies for what we think represents threats to the parliamentary democracy in our region. And in studio with us this evening is, in my far right, the leader of Team Unity in Grenada, Dr. Tim Harris. Dr. Harris, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm leader of Team Unity in St. Kitts and Nevis.
And Nevis. I did miss South Nevis, right? Yeah. I'm very sorry for the
Grenada.
invasion. And the political leader of the National Democratic Congress in Grenada.
Thank you and welcome.
Mr. Nazim.V.
Thank you very much.
And joining us online from Antigua is Mr. Gaston Browne, who is the opposition leader of the Antigua Labour Party. Mr. Browne, thank you for joining us.
Good evening to you, Jerry, and good evening to your entire viewership.
Okay. Gentlemen, as I say, let's first of all look at what we have as the governance structure, mostly in our region, the Westminster system. And the question is, I guess we need to look at as we continue this evening's program, is the Westminster system serving us? What would you say are some of the benefits of the Westminster system, Dr. Harris?
Well, by and large, the Westminster model was intended to give us a government that certainly was representative of us. And that was a critical matter and a critical feature of democratic governance, government of and by the people, and the Westminster models which we inherited and over time evolved. Those models were intended to give us a government that we deserve.
That we deserve.
That we deserve. That's by and large is the essence of the democratic system.
Mr. Burke?
Well, the question is, what is the purpose of the system? I agree with Dr. Harris. The system was intended to provide some regime, some structure that would afford the people an opportunity to have some say in the government of their own affairs, you know, that they would have a voice, they would have a say. And so the design of the system itself must be brought under scrutiny if we're talking about whether the system is serving its purpose. You know, fundamentally, I think the system can work. The system is designed in such a way to provide for lawmaking authority in a parliament. It provides for elections. It sets up a system by which elections are to be conducted. It contains, I do believe, certain checks and balances to ensure that you do not have excessive behavior. But of course, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people.
Human beings, right?
We're dealing with human beings. And I'm quite sure this is part of what has put us in the position that we are.
We'll go into each of the situations at the moment. But let me invite Mr. Browne as he gives us his view on whether or not the Westminster system is serving us and what exactly does he understand it to be, especially as he aims to be Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you again, Jerry, and again, good evening to everyone, including Dr. Timothy Harris and Mr. Nazim-V.
Good evening.
Other two panelists indicated that one is about representative governance, governance for the people, and obviously democracy is about ensuring that there is full participation of the people. Now, insofar as the Westminster system is concerned, clearly there is a separation of powers. I think that is one of the most important aspects, in that it allows for three different governance. You have the executive, you have the parliament.
Could you expand on those a bit for me, please? What exactly does those mean?
Well, you have the executive, which in essence is the cabinet that is responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the running of the government. You have the parliament, which comprises of all elected officials, both sides, or let's say all sides for that matter, comprising the governing party or parties within the coalition, and certainly the opposition. And you also have the judiciary, and obviously they are there to litigate any issues that may arise within those two arms. I do not know that there is a fundamental problem with the system. Perhaps it is the administration of the Westminster system that is the problem, in the sense that when you look at, for instance, the separation between the parliament and the executive, generally speaking, they almost fuse together, because you have a situation in which the executive is almost tantamount to the parliament, because, as you know, generally speaking in parliament, the majority rules, and it is the majority in the parliament that makes up the executive.
But hold on, is it because the parliament consists of both the opposition and the government? So are you saying that really and truly what is really fused is the party in power and the rest? Is that what you're really telling us?
I think it goes beyond that. I mean, you have a scenario in which you can consider the executive and the parliament to be almost one of the same, barring the opposition members.
But that's where I have a problem with you. The parliament is not just the governing side. The parliament includes both.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. But the point I'm making here is that because you have few backbenchers, government backbenchers, you find, for instance, that most of the members who constitute the executive, they are also members of the parliament. Well, they must be members of the parliament anyway, at least those who are in the lower house. But you have a scenario in which, let's say, if the parliament takes, if the executive takes a decision, for instance, almost invariably they constitute the majority in the parliament as well. If, for instance, you had a large backbencher base that could potentially vote with the opposition.
Well, let's first of all talk about that backbench story, because I don't think it is something that is very prevalent in our region. And in fact, a little bit later, I'm going to get Dr. Timothy Harris to tell us how St. Kitts differs than most of the region. But backbench, what do we mean by backbenchers?
We're talking about individuals who would have been elected with the governing party, but they do not form part of the executive. They are members of parliament, and they should have some leverage to even speak independently. But the scenario normally is that I'd say at least 95% of those who become elected find themselves as members of the executive. So that almost invariably, whatever the executive decides is actually passed by the parliament, because you don't have that type of, let's say, deep base among the backbenchers who perhaps could speak independently and conjoin with the opposition to pass any measure that the executive will bring to the parliament. So I think that in itself creates a problem. in the sense that you do not have, for instance, the type of independence within the Parliament compared to the executive. And as I said, in essence, whatever the executive decides almost invariably passes through the lower house. And as you know too, they have their parliamentary whip as well. So even sometimes the backbenchers, they too are intimidated and do not necessarily take any independent position. So there's not a clear distinction between the parliament itself and the executive in the sense of the fact that they almost always conjoin to promote the position of the executive.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Harris here. St. Kitts does not work. We have the Parliament, there's what is called, and I want you guys to explain these two things, the bicameral system and the unicameral system. Which of those systems work in St. Kitts, and why is it like that, and how does it differ?
Well, the traditional Westminster model presupposes an upper house and the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, the upper house being a nominated house.
Elected. You mean.
The lower house being the elected, and the upper house being equivalent to a Senate.
Okay.
Non-elected, appointed members. And in several of the Caribbean countries, CARICOM countries, you have both houses. I think Grenada does, Antigua does. In the case of St. Kitts, we have a unicameral system where we have both unelected and elected members sitting in the same house. There's one house. However, with respect to unelected members, they cannot vote on a motion of no confidence. That is one of the fundamental restrictions placed on them, although they are members of the National Assembly.
Let's broaden it. They can't vote to make laws.
They can vote to make laws, save when it comes to a motion of no confidence.
Okay.
There is within our Constitution a prohibition that on that fundamental matter, dealing with the continuity of the government, senators, unelected members of Parliament cannot vote on that measure. And other measures, they certainly can.
So they can vote to keep the government running, literally?
They can.
Yeah.
They can. They are counted among the votes equal with respect to other bits of legislation, save for the fundamental matter of the motion of no confidence. In this regard, their votes and their participation is prohibited in that particular matter.
Mr. Burke, what's your take on both systems, the unicameral system, the bicameral system? Do you see a benefit either way?
Well, perhaps there are some advantages in the unicameral system, because I think for small countries like ours, having a bicameral arrangement where you need two houses, two sets of meetings, two sets of clerks, two sets of resources applied and so on, it costs more to run the parliament than it would cost in a unilateral arrangement. Perhaps even just in terms of efficiency of time and the use of time of the scarce people that you have in the society. Having one meeting, debating all the issues, ventilating the concerns, and voting on them, perhaps it is just more efficient. That would be my...
But let me come to you now, because, and let me bring you a particular situation on the table now you've said that. In Grenada, the ruling party won, current ruling party won all of the seats. If there was no bicameral situation in Grenada where you had the opportunity to put some people in the second house, how would you have been represented? Because now you're represented because you can put senators.
Right, but you see, the unicameral system does not preclude senators. You can have senators in the unicameral arrangement as well. All that it is a single house.
No, I agree with you, yeah. But the question I'm really asking, do you think it would have been as easy to put senators in a unicameral system where all the seats were won by one party?
Well, where the seats are won by one party, it would not be any different if the Constitution makes provisions for people to get into the Senate, other than by the appointment of or through the advice of the Prime Minister himself. And our Constitution makes an arrangement for 13 senators to be in the upper house, 7 of which must be appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister, and another 3 on the advice of the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition, and another 3 by the Governor General exercising his own or her own deliberate judgment after consultation with certain organizations in the country.
We'll come back to you on that. We take our first break on this edition of Time to Face the Facts. Is parliamentary democracy threatened in the Caribbean? We'll be right back in just a moment.
When you send money with Western Union, you're sending a smile, a gift, a hello, or even support. It's a fast and convenient way to stay connected with loved ones around the world, or even across the Caribbean. From any of our convenient agent locations, depend on Western Union to send your money quickly and reliably. Western Union, moving money for better.
Agents in Grenada, Rennick Thompson and Company, with locations in Grenville, Sauterres, Guave, Grenans, the Carinade, Bruce Street, and Carriacou.
To thrive in today's dynamic business environment, you need the right partner. Digicel Business is that partner, offering you the flexibility you need to flourish. Our scalable solutions will increase your effectiveness and efficiency while enabling workforce mobility. Large or small, you can't hide from potential threats to your business. With a partner protecting your interests, you can focus on productivity. It's amazing where the right partnership can develop and how far it can take you. Contact us today. Digicel Business, complete solutions for your needs.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place. CARICOM, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel, and festivals. Advertise on the CARICOM platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries, and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area, and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CARICOM, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
Welcome back to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. On Google Hangout from Antigua's Mr. Gaston Browne, who is the leader of the opposition there, the Antigua Labour Party. In studio with me, Dr. Timothy Harris, leader of Team Unity in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Mr. Nazim.V, political leader of the National Democratic Congress in Grenada. You said when you went out, and we're speaking about how we appoint senators, the leader of the opposition. De facto, there is no leader of opposition. You are de facto leader of the opposition in Grenada. There is no such position since nobody has won a seat. So that's why I'm asking the question. Suppose how easy it would be, much easier it would be for you to be excluded in the present system.
Well, I'm suggesting that the ease or difficulty would not change if the Constitution provides, as it does now, for the Governor General to exercise his or her discretion and to appoint senators. The Constitution of Grenada, Section 62 to be precise, says that if the office of the leader of the opposition is vacant, or there's somebody who can hold the post but is not willing to accept the post, the Governor General can, in the exercise of his or her own deliberate judgment, do for himself or herself anything that he would have required the advice of the opposition leader to do. In this case, for example, in the normal course of things, the Governor General would seek the advice or would act on the advice of the leader of the opposition to select 3 of the senators. If there's no opposition leader, the Governor General, relying on Section 62 of the Constitution, can still go ahead and appoint those 3 persons as opposition senators.
Okay, I get it.
So even if it was a unicameral, even if it were a unicameral arrangement, that can still happen.
But what power does those 3 persons really have at the end of the day?
Well, at the end of the day, their voices. I mean, the idea really is advocacy. I think Mr. Browne was making the very critical point earlier when he spoke, that at the end of the day, the party that has the majority in the parliament will always prevail. So as long as you have at least 1 vote more than the opposition, your will prevail in the parliament. So it is understandable that if we are 3 out of 13, or even 6, assuming that the 3 independent senators, because the Constitution also provides for the appointment of 3 independent senators by the Governor General, acting in his own deliberate judgment after consultations with certain organizations in the country. So at the most, you would have 6 persons who were not appointed on the advice of the Prime Minister, 6 of the 13. So at the end of the day, as long as the governing side has the majority, their position may prevail. But that does not preclude the debate. That does not preclude the sensitization. That does not preclude the education. That does not preclude the advocacy. And that's what it is. It's a debate. It's a debate in the Parliament that will afford the public an opportunity to make a choice, an opportunity to say yea or nay, an opportunity to express their will. And I think that's the most you can really expect in the Parliament.
Well, I think as MP Burke just said, it's really a function of the Constitution. And certainly in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, I don't know that we have an equivalent of that provision. And so in our case, unless there's a leader of the opposition, the ability for the opposition then to have senators basically becomes non-existent, in that they are the specific appointee of the leader of the opposition. And so
the Governor General there does not have a discretion?
No. He will appoint on the advice of the leader of the opposition, just as he would equally appoint those on the government side and on the advice of the Prime Minister.
I want our viewers to understand this might seem subtle, but a very significant distinction. In the case of Grenada, the Governor General has some discretion, okay? In the case of St. Kitts,
no discretion.
No discretion. So if all the seats were won by any particular party in St. Kitts, that's it.
You have effectively a one-party state operating in that context. But it also bears one of the difference between our adaptation of the Westminster model and what prevails in the UK, in that you would hardly, and in fact, I don't think there have ever been a time where you had one party winning all of the seats in the context of the Westminster model, which we have adopted in the UK. And so it is unique to our own adaptation of it and our own working of the system that certainly we have had instances where you end up with one party basically taking all the seats.
Doesn't that point directly to what might be considered a flaw in our adaptation of the Westminster system?
Well, you can look at it that way, and certainly one may then use that to make the point that we have the Westminster model in form, but not necessarily the substance of it in terms of how it would operate, the normal checks and balances, the normal kinds of situations, thinking and understanding of the system that will ensure always there is an opposition voice and there is a loyal leader of Her Majesty's opposition operating. I think our system did not necessarily contemplate for this kind of a situation that has evolved in Grenada, certainly in the context of Jamaica many years ago, through the boycott of one of the party, the People's National Party, under Manley. We ended up also with a government that largely reflected one view. So these are aberrations in the context of the democratic tradition that we inherited and the democratic norms. And
so did we really, and let me bring in Mr. Browne here, did we really inherit a system, or did we use our own means to, because it hasn't happened in Britain. A lot of things that, for example, the backbench rule in Britain, where persons feel free to vote against their own party, that can't happen in these islands. It just wouldn't.
Well, the question is whether it can or whether it wouldn't.
It wouldn't, I agree. Let me bring in Mr. Browne here. Mr. Browne, tell me your view on whether or not we have really adapted correctly the Westminster system as practiced in the UK.
Well, again, I mean, you're looking at a much smaller population, I mean, far less seats. So the practicality of having backbenchers who will have the type of independence is just not reality. I mean, if you have a situation, for instance, in Antigua and Barbuda, you have a total of 17 seats. And unless you have a landslide victory, let's say on average, a government may have possibly, let's say, 11 seats. And if you have 2 backbenchers, generally, you don't want to keep them happy, because if you have a third one, then your government can find itself in a minority position. So these are some of the idiosyncrasies that one has to take into consideration. Obviously, if there's a much larger country with lots more seats, then you'd have had a situation in which you'll have a larger cadre of backbenchers, and individuals will be able to speak, independently. And generally speaking, you have backbenchers competing as well with ministers, obviously trying to get on the front benches. So it's a whole different dynamic here, perhaps as a result of size to some extent, and not necessarily a function of the model per se. Or maybe you can argue that the model perhaps would work better in larger societies.
That's why a little bit later we're going to come and look at what do we need to do? Do we need to change our constitution? Do we need to have a look at them for them to be more sensible and sensitive to our situation?
And obviously, there's certain idiosyncrasies that we have to take into consideration. And I think one of the problems within the region is that we do not update or review our constitutions as often as perhaps we ought to. And I believe the reason for that too is that generally most of the clauses are entrenched clauses calling for a referendum. And most governments do not want to risk losing a referendum because of the implications it has on a general election. In
St. Vincent, that didn't prove to be true. So I disagree with that. In St. Vincent, the opposition would say the opposition forces to the proposed constitution, right? Won the day. Right, and when I say the opposition forces, I don't necessarily mean the opposition party, but the people opposed what was presented to them by the government for the change in the constitution, but followed up by winning the next general election. So,
yeah, that may be so, but there's no doubt that the opposition had gathered significant momentum, and the government did not quite win by a landslide victory. So I'm quite sure that particular issue may have helped to influence support for the opposition party. I'm not saying necessarily that governments should react exclusively to the whole issue of the impact on elections when it comes to constitutional changes, but you cannot ignore the fact that it does have some influence.
Grenada is heading towards a referendum. It's been announced. What's the feeling on the ground?
Well, there is a certain ambivalence about the idea of constitutional reform itself at this time.
Why? Why is that?
For 2 reasons, basically. First of all, there are people who just believe in the middle of an economic crisis, when people are preoccupied with bread and butter issues, when people cannot find jobs, when 52.6% of the young people in the country are unemployed, when the overall rate of unemployment is 37% or 32%. When the poverty rate is 37% in the country, when people simply cannot find jobs and opportunities, their preoccupation is not changing the Constitution. So at that simple level, people are not enthused by the idea. The second concern has to do with the sense of hypocrisy about this initiative. And by that I mean that we are facing a situation on the one hand where the government is advocating the need for constitutional reform, and yet on the other is showing a total disregard for the Constitution itself. In other words, here we are saying that we want to change the Constitution.
We'll come to that issue because we need to go to a break. But before we go to that break, and we'll come back to you on that issue, you complain about the state of the economy, but you were the last Minister of Finance, and some might charge that you must take responsibility for that.
Well, no, some may charge, but I will not take responsibility
Why not?
for it. For two reasons. First, because the problem that we face in Grenada was not created during the term that I was in office. This is a problem.
Okay, hold. I'll let you come back and finish that.
Very well.
This is Time to Face the Facts, and we'll go to another break at this moment. Stay with us. We'll be right back in just a moment.
To thrive in today's dynamic business environment, you need the right partner. Digicel Business is that partner, offering you the flexibility you need to flourish. Our scalable solutions will increase your effectiveness and efficiency while enabling workforce mobility. Large or small, you can't hide from potential threats to your business. With a partner protecting your interests, you can focus on productivity. It's amazing where the right partnership can develop and how far it can take you. Contact us today. Digicel Business, complete solutions for your needs.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place. CARICOM, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel, and festivals. Advertise on the CARICOM platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries, and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area, and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CARICOM, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
When you send money with Western Union, you're sending a smile, a gift, a hello, or even support. It's a fast and convenient way to stay connected with loved ones around the world, or even across the Caribbean. From any of our convenient agent locations, depend on Western Union to send your money quickly and reliably. Western Union, moving money for better.
Agents in Grenada, Rennick Thompson & Company, with locations in Grenville, Sauterres, Guave, Grenada, the Carinage, Bruce Street, and CARICOM.
Is parliamentary democracy in the Caribbean threatened? That's the subject for discussion on this edition of Time to Face the Facts. And joining us on set are Dr. Timothy Harris out of St. Kitts Nevis, Mr. Nazim Burke from Grenada, and on our Google Hangout link, Mr. Gaston Browne from Antigua. I was letting you finish before we went to the break. First, the challenge that you were the one who left the economy in the state that the government has found it in, and secondly, to the issue of the constitutional reform.
Right. On the first issue, let me say that we took office in July of 2008. By September the 7th, 6 weeks later, Lehman Brothers collapsed and the official economic crisis began in the United States, even though it had started before. And 2009, 2010, we knew exactly what was going on throughout the world, throughout the advanced economies and the Caribbean, that we were locked in a very deep and prolonged economic crisis. So a lot of what was happening had nothing to do with management. It had to do with scarcity of resources. And this is a basic challenge that I think we all continue to face today. But more than that, I think Grenada found itself in the unique situation where there was a sustained period of poor economic management dating back to 1995. In 1995, the government of now Prime Minister Mitchell campaigned on a policy of eliminating all taxes if he won the elections. The International Monetary Fund advised against it. The World Bank advised against it. The CDB advised against it. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank advised against it. All of the multilateral partners and development partners advised against it. He went ahead with it. And of course, if you don't tax, it means that your sources of financing the operations of government are severely constrained. It's not all going to come from grants. It's not all going to come from begging. It's not all going to come from printing money, because you can't print money in the context in which we find ourselves, which means that it will come from borrowing. And of course, if you borrow, you have to repay. And if you borrow, you have to invest in things that will provide the returns to generate the revenues that are necessary to pay the loans and to build and to develop the country, to meet your recurrent expenditure and the capital expenditure. That could not happen because the government basically went on a spending spree, borrowed monies, in some cases found itself incurring debt by guaranteeing loans for crooks and criminals, really, that came into the country with nothing to invest, but on false pretenses, the government guaranteed loans for them, and we ended up having to pay for those. So,
but you didn't sell, that argument didn't sell with the Grenada electorate, because if you're saying that, you knew that, clearly they didn't buy it because they just kicked you out of government completely.
Right. Well, whether they buy it or not, it's a fact. And that's really what matters. I'm simply answering to you why it is.
So you did a bad job selling them.
Well, that is so. That is so. So the fact is that that is the reality. So we perhaps were not effective enough in selling the message. And it's difficult to sell that message when people are hurting. You know, you can explain to a guy why he's hungry. But if he's hungry, he's hungry. And if he wants something to eat, he wants something to eat. So it is always difficult for a ruling party to sell the reasons why you're not doing well in an economic crisis. That's why I think opposition parties tend to have the upper hand in a recession. So it's a reality that we have to contend with.
And the question of the referendum?
Yes, I was making the point that, you know, it cannot be that a government is trying to say to the nation, we see the critical need for constitutional reform, while at the same time disobeying, disregarding the Constitution, and basically treating the Constitution as a nuisance, you see? And this is what is going on in Grenada today. It's finding the most frightening expression in the way that the government has been dealing with the Office of the Supervisor of Elections.
Tell us a little bit about that.
We had a situation where our Constitution, let me say first of all, Section 35 makes it clear that the Governor General, the Office of the Supervisor of Elections is an independent office. The Supervisor of Elections shall be chosen by the Governor General. Once chosen, the Supervisor of Elections must answer to no other person or authority. That person basically is his own boss, and all that he or she is required to do is that in his or her own discretion may file reports to the Parliament of the country through the minister responsible for the time being on what is going on or where they think they may need the intervention of the Parliament. On the 28th of July of last year, the cabinet of the country took a decision that, well, sent a letter to the Supervisor of Elections saying, from now on, we are going to take control in effect. They said, we are approving all of these offices as new offices of the Supervisor of Elections. And they listed 7 or 8 offices. Then they said, we have decided that we are going to introduce a new voter ID system and voter registration system in the office, even though we introduced a new system in January 2012. I'm sorry. I'm talking about less than a year. The very system that we went into the elections with, a system that was purchased with the advice and involvement of the Organization of American States, a system that was approved and lauded by the Organization of American States after its implementation, a system that gave the same government 15 seats in the Parliament. But yet, within months of coming into office, they took the decision that they were going to introduce a new voter registration system. The same memo that was sent to the Office of the Supervisor said, in any event, we have decided that the government, the cabinet has decided, we are going to install internet services in the electoral office, in the electoral offices around the country, and put the electoral offices on a shared network, the e-group system on a shared network with the Office of the Prime Minister.
Really?
That is in effect what has been done, yes. So the e-group system, which is an electronic government system that is within the Office of the Prime Minister, the server of that system is housed in the Office of the Prime Minister. And they're saying now we will introduce this new system that will make the electoral office part of the e-grip system, which means that if the survey is in the Prime Minister's office will have direct access to the computers in the electoral offices. And the same memo says to the Supervisor of Elections, please note, we have already contacted the service provider Lime and instructed them to go ahead and introduce the internet services. This letter was sent on the 28th of August, notifying her of the decision they had taken on the 28th of July. She then wrote a letter back to the cabinet saying, listen, you can't do this. The Constitution says that I must act independently, and we don't need this, right? And if we need it, we are going to do it ourselves. Once she said that, she was called in by the Governor General on the 30th of September and fired effective the 1st of October. Within 24 hours, she was dismissed from the job, yeah?
Because she objected?
Because she objected. So, of course, they offered no other reasons, except I think they offered two reasons. One was we got a complaint from somebody who took part in the elections that they had asked you for a document and you didn't give it to them. Yeah? As somebody who basically got 127 votes in the elections. Yeah? A party that got less than 200 votes in the elections. We got a complaint from this person that she had asked you for some information and you didn't provide it. And the second reason is, this is the Governor General talking, well, they say this e-grip system is necessary, so I'm dismissing you. I can show you the affidavit that was filed in court because the former supervisor has taken the Governor General to court. And that matter is now before the court.
Good. Stop right there, because you have put what I would like to call the first of our case studies at the table. Let me go to Mr. Browne in Antigua, in Antigua, because yesterday the Parliament in Antigua automatically dissolved. Mr. Browne, tell us about something about that.
Correct, but if I could just comment briefly on the previous issue. I'm not sure I heard all of it. The reception here is very bad. But the supervised elections is clearly a creature of the Constitution. That is certainly the case here in Antigua and Barbuda. And we have seen a situation in which the government has actually sought to strip the supervisor of elections of her responsibilities. In fact, they did that back in 2010. We took the matter to court and won, and they literally had to restore all of her responsibilities, including her responsibility to be involved in the registration of electors. So what we have seen from time to time is the abuse of the constitutional provisions. So as I said earlier, the problem may not necessarily be the Westminster system, but perhaps the whole execution and the attempt by let's say politicians to abuse the system in order to
in this case, Mr. Browne, in this case, right, and in Grenada's case, the Governor General, who should act above all of the political fray, is implicated.
Well, and that is not uncommon, because we had a similar situation here as well, in which the Governor General had intervened as well, involving the chairman of the Electoral Commission here, Sir Gerald Watt. In fact, the Prime Minister, after the 2009 general elections, which the UPP narrowly won, commissioned an inquiry into the conduct of the commissioners on the Antigua and Barbuda Electoral Commission, and they were found not to have been guilty of any wrongdoing. But however, he was gung-ho about removing the chairman. And what you also understand too, that we have leaders who are prepared to have friendly hands responsible for the electoral process, obviously to ensure that they're in a position to manipulate the process. And again, that in itself is an abuse of the whole system. So we have seen a similar situation here. In fact, the Prime Minister himself literally, I would say, was held in contempt of the court, in the sense that after they removed the chairman of the Electoral Commission, he took the matter to court, he won, and what the Prime Minister then did is that he went to Parliament and passed a law and then made it retroactive in terms of its effect, after the litigation was actually heard and the judgment given. And he then again had to go and reverse it, and the court chided him in a very serious way for literally acting in contempt of the court decision. And then he also, as I said earlier, stripped the supervisory elections of her duties. Again, we took the matter to court, and he had to restore the functions of the supervisory elections. But insofar as the question that you asked about the automatic dissolution of Parliament, you're absolutely right. The Parliament dissolved automatically yesterday. I think it is the first time that this has happened, certainly in any modern democracy at any time, in which the Prime Minister would have failed to exercise his constitutional right to dissolve the Parliament and to call elections. And this would have happened as a result of the fact that the time would have passed, the Parliament would have dissolved, and he would not have gotten a particular decision that he was awaiting. As you know, too, we had 2 additional litigations, one in which we sought to stop the government from gerrymandering the boundaries, and a second one in which we also took it to court took the government to court to stop them from disenfranchising thousands of electors. Now, insofar as the one with the gerrymandering of the boundaries is concerned, he was awaiting for that opportunity to have the elections on new boundaries. I think he's come to the conclusion that the UPP government cannot win based on the present boundaries. In fact, they have done polls, we have done polls, we have had Peter Wickham, we've had Bill Johnson, who've all polled, and they have shown invariably that the Labour Party would win the upcoming polls on the existing boundaries. So clearly, Prime Minister, recognizing that, has now sought to change the boundaries with the hope that we'll have a fighting chance of winning the election. So clearly, we had an obligation to act, and we took the matter to court. The actual judgment will be given tomorrow, but the judgment would have come 2 days after the dissolution of Parliament. So the fact that the Parliament actually dissolved before the judgment would have been given means that the Prime Minister cannot make any changes to the boundaries. Again, because we have been a vigilant opposition party, we've been able to stop that potential abuse of our constitutional provisions and literally to stop Prime Minister Spencer from stealing the upcoming poll.
Listen, are we then putting the judiciary under unnecessary pressure because we are at this point seeming to want everything to go to be decided by the court? We don't have hanging chads in the Caribbean, clearly. The American system did a couple of years ago. Are we, gentlemen, putting the judiciary under too much pressure?
Well, in our system, the judiciary is where you go when there is a disagreement, when people are not able to find common ground. Then the arbiter in our system, in our model, basically is the judiciary. And we should go because we are people governed by rule of law. In fact, our constitution, those that we have more or less brought home post-independence, basically say that we are constitutional democracy. And in that context, the Constitution then is supreme. So wherever there is an infringement or violation of our constitutional rights or any other rights, then the just place to which we go to get reprieve, to get redress, to get relief, certainly will be the court. What we have to do is to strengthen the capacity of our courts, our judiciary, to deliver, both in terms of quality of personnel and in terms of quantity.
How many times have we seen in this region the judiciary rule against a ruling government? In the case of Antigua, they simply didn't do anything, so it happened. How often have we seen the judiciary in this region actually take a stand and rule against the government?
Well, that is why we speak both to quality and quantity, because the basic, apart from the knowledge of the law, this notion of independence as it relates to professionals, in my view, is a cardinal aspect for those who are involved in judiciary. And yet, at times, people have to make hard choices which impacts upon government, which they have to relate, the government that pays their salary, that provide them with the police officers that maintain their security. You have to take hard decisions, and there have been
but
times.
Also, the government decide the choices of who go where. Because I've known instances where the governments have objected to certain individuals in the High Court and stuff, and that's it.
It has not been perfect, but we have had some judges who have done fantastic job. We had a judge who, and we have, in fact, a judge that came in to St. Kitts and Nevis faced with an important question to do with our own motion of no confidence, handled that matter very professionally, made a judgment in February 12, which was adverse to the government. And by and large, is a judgment which all the legal practitioners I know have hailed as being the right one. So we have from time to time those who have met the test of independence. And the independence and competence, in my view, are the two most critical attributes that we want people in the judiciary to have. They will come under stress given the nature of the societies, small friendships across the board, but they have to find within themselves, within the way in which they organize themselves, the mechanisms that allow them to keep their independence, and not just in form, independence in substance. The appearance is critical. You can't be buddy-buddying up and down with government officials and even people in the opposition. And then when you have the matter before them, the public feel a sense that these relationships would have compromised your integrity. So it is challenging in small societies, and that has been in part one of the reasons that people have put forward for maintenance of the Privy Council. The sense that out there, people who are not a part and parcel of the trust, the hustle and bustle of the socio-economic paradigm, that they could come to the matter with that notion of independence intact, and also perhaps that whole virtue of competence intact. So it is a challenging situation, but one I believe that we certainly within the Caribbean can overcome.
Come back to you, but you seem to want to have said some things to Burke.
Well, two things. I wanted to say, first of all, that I have to agree that the courts has to be the place to go. In fact, it is the place to go. That is the role of the court. The role of the court is to interpret and apply the law. That's really what they're there to do. Yes.
Yeah. All right, okay.
And I think more than that, the court is the guardian of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. The court is there to ensure that people do not try to trample upon the Constitution. So there's no other recourse, really, legal recourse, when somebody is doing this. You have to go to them. I want to say also in relation to the judges, that I think there have been many cases of outstanding judges in the Caribbean standing up and expressing themselves, judicially speaking, and showing the kind of judicial courage that is needed. This is something that has always puzzled me a little bit, that, you know, there are people who have authority, but seem scared to exercise the authority. You're the registrar, but somehow you're afraid being the registrar. You're a judge, but you're afraid being a judge. The fact of the matter is, the government cannot fire the judges. The government do not hire the judges, the government cannot fire the judges. And the judges really have nothing to fear by being courageous, by doing what is right. The most that they can do is say, we're not going to send a policeman to provide you with security. That's perhaps the most they're going to do. They can't take the jobs away, they can't take the salaries away. There's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, if anybody...
But they can also, when the time comes around, object to them being in the country,
well,
especially as the judges are moved around.
Yes, but the fact is, they will find other places, and they will do their job. Because the role is to interpret and apply the law. There is no reason to be afraid. Interpret and apply the law. And that's really what it is.
We're going to have a break. When we come back, I want to focus now on the St. Kitts. We heard Antigua situation. We heard from you. We'll put them all in the melting pot.
One thing I want to tell you on Grenada, I didn't finish the story.
Quickly.
Well, after the break. After the break.
No, I want to come back there, so quickly.
Well, I want to say that it doesn't end with the fact that the Governor General, that this woman was fired as office supervisor of elections. But an acting supervisor was put in place, and recently he has had to resign because the person who is the IT administrator there, trained by the OES, the government decided they're removing him from that office.
Hold right there. We have quite a mix here. This is Time to Face the Facts, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you what is the view of somebody. We're going to play a clip that tells us what's the view of a very significant person in the Bar Association in St. Kitts. He's speaking of the threat we're speaking of. Don't go away. We'll be right back in just a moment.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
It's the end of the month again. My son's rent is due.
Sending money to your children studying overseas is easy. Western Union's safe and reliable service lets you transfer money everywhere in the world.
My son is doing well at school. That makes me proud.
Western Union, moving money for better.
Agents in Grenada, Rennick Thompson and Company, with locations in Grenville, Sauterres, Guave, Granans, the Carinage, Bruce Street, and Carriacou.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place. CARICOM, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel, and festivals. Advertise on the CARICOM platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries, and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area, and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CARICOM, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
To thrive in today's dynamic business environment, you need the right partner. Digicel Business is that partner, offering you the flexibility you need to flourish. Our scalable solutions will increase your effectiveness and efficiency while enabling workforce mobility. Large or small, you can't hide from potential threats to your business. With a partner protecting your interests, you can focus on productivity. It's amazing where the right partnership can develop and how far it can take you. Contact us today. Digicel Business, complete solutions for your needs.
The institutions that are there to safeguard democracy within the framework of the Constitution are under threat. The institutions that are there to safeguard democracy within the framework of the Constitution are under threat.
Welcome back to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. A clear statement there by Mr. Dwyer Stefan, and it forms the basis of the argument that we're presenting on this program, that the Constitution is under threat by the governing parties. Give us a little bit more of the situation in St. Kitts.
Well, I believe what we have had are serial abuses in our Constitution.
Serial abuses.
In the context of St. Kitts and Nevis. And just to go quickly to the discussion we had before, how the supervisor of elections, critical to the whole concept of free and fair elections, how that person is chosen, what are the qualifications for such a person, those things are not, as it were, spelled out in our Constitution. And so we have had in St. Kitts and Nevis, perhaps a few weeks ago, the appointment of a supervisor of elections after the substantive holder had been incapacitated due to illness for over a 6 months period. Not a word from officialdom that the gentleman was incapacitated, that he was unable to perform his function. And so you ask the question, who had been performing those functions and what legal support did that person have for performing those? Lo and behold, an acting appointment is being made. The appointment is made without the consultation envisaged by the Constitution with the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Mark Brantley in Nevis, and the Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Van Semry. And so you have someone who, in our view, does not meet the constitutional requirement for appointment, and at the same time, someone who is an obvious party hack, someone who has no call to glory, neither in terms of performance in any job, in maturity, in skill sets. Certainly, of all that we have had as supervisor of elections, this one is at the lowest of the low. And so it brings into question what it is agitated the mind of the Governor General in making the appointment, and in making such appointment to have chosen a party hack. These are the issues that lead to the compromising of our democracy, and that position is so critical to the achievement of free and fair elections that when that happens, we have a cardinal blow being struck in the face of democracy.
One thing I've seen in St. Kitts, as we expand on the St. Kitts situation a little bit, and we're going to look at what the Bar Association has to say, that some NGOs have spoken out about the situation in St. Kitts. That's another area that we find a bit lacking in the region, that the NGOs tend to be very quiet. So if we could get the views of the Bar Association up next, that would be great, because I think that's a move in the right direction. We need more of that in our region. Because what I think is happening is that the political parties are superseding the NGOs in many cases in our region.
Well, what we are losing by that is really participatory democracy, the ability to build an inclusive kind of democracy where other people other than political actors have voices and are using those voices to influence outcome. In our societies, we hardly have think tanks. We hardly have the intelligentsia that would operate in many more advanced countries, whether in the US or in Canada or in the UK, to influence public policy developments. And that is critical. And so we need to have more of that. Luckily for us in St. Kitts and Nevis, on the question of the motion of no confidence, we have had the Bar Council speaking out, the Christian Evangelical Association, the Hotel and Tourism Authority, and we have had the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, all of them condemning this inordinate delay in the tabling and the debate and vote on the motion of no confidence.
Okay, we seem to have a little delay in terms of that clip. You have it? Okay, go ahead, please.
Nothing has happened in the year and a month since, which in our opinion could have precluded the Speaker from bringing the motion before the National Assembly. Whether it is the legal proceedings or any other matter, as the court has indicated, nothing is there to stop the Speaker now or has been at any time since the motion was filed in December 2012.
So there you have it. The Bar Association, legal brains, who have the opportunity to look at what has happened in terms of the Constitution, are saying that the government are on the wrong side of history. And the government has refused.
Well, the government has lost moral authority, has lost the right to govern, and it has lost its sense of decency. And so the government has no sense of what it is to operate in a democratic society. The government has no sense of the importance of a motion of no confidence in the context of our own constitutional democracy.
Let's pause and let's hear what the Prime Minister himself and how he views the present situation. Let's get that clip.
It's a joke. It cannot happen in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I want to repeat it because people seem to think that we're making joke about this thing. No Governor General is constitutionally empowered to take that action. And if that action is taken, the Labour Party will demonstrate who is in charge.
So there you have it. Again, seemingly a flaw in the Constitution. Because the Westminster system says that the Queen is head of state, that basically the Governor General should act for the Queen. Do you think the Queen would act like that? Is a question that we need to ask.
Well, and you must ask yourself the follow-up question. Do you see Prime Minister Cameron or a Prime Minister Blair speaking about Her Majesty in the manner in which That Prime Minister just spoke about the head of state in the country. And you see the contrast both in substance and in form. But the matter is even more significant than that, because what he is attempting to deny is that the Governor General has a good office. And the good office provides for him an opportunity to intervene when there is a political and constitutional impasse in any country. And in that regard, we have precedent coming from the Solomon Islands, where in fact it was put to the Governor General, as we have put to ours in St. Kitts and Nevis, I think in March of last year, that by and large, we were going to support the motion of no confidence. 6 of us wrote to him, making it clear that we also did not support Dr. Denzil Douglas as the Prime Minister. When a similar situation like that occurred in the Solomon Island, the Governor General there says to the Prime Minister, show me your numbers. I need to know how many persons you have. And
okay, let me just come back to Mr. Browne in Antigua.
Yes.
Mr. Browne?
Hi, go right ahead.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure you've been listening to all of this. And I
have to admit, I missed half of what was said, especially those clips. They weren't very clear, obviously because of the connection, but go ahead.
No, but the question now of who should intervene. We have the Governor Generals being compromised, has happened in your case, okay? Similar seem in Grenada, where the Governor General takes a stand against the Supervisor of Elections. You speak of St. Kitts. What should happen then, you think?
Well, we need to go back to the individuals who we have serving in certain capacities. For instance, our Governor General should always be above the fray. That person obviously is the embodiment of the sovereignty of the nation and should be able to act fairly and independently at all times. Even the various commissions, the boundaries commissions, electoral commissions, we need to have individuals who are at least objective and fair in the dispensing of their responsibilities instead of appointing party hacks. And you know, the irony about it is that whenever you have appointees to these commissions, the governing party, or the Prime Minister, will appoint party hacks, and the opposition will follow as well and appoint party hacks.
I was coming to that bit.
I think the issue here is about you know, increasing the level of maturity so that these major governance institutions, that you have individuals who have the level of integrity and maturity to serve and to ensure that ultimately that there is justice.
Let me move to another point, because I'm looking at the time. We have some other issues we want to crack on. The question that was asked recently, how does CARICOM, which supposedly represents the totality of the region, shouldn't they have a place? But let's, in a brief moment, play what the current chairman of CARICOM has to say, and let us hear what the views are on that issue. Because certainly, there must be somebody outside, higher than, with some moral suasion that should be able to be brought to the situation. So could we have that clip with the current chairman of CARICOM?
There are no human rights issues at stake in St. Kitts. There is no breakdown of law and order.
Is that I deplore the view that has been expressed by some in CARICOM that a constitutional crisis would only exist if there were violence. I find that suggestion irresponsible. One does not want to promote violence. One wants the peaceful and mature resolution of issues such as this. So I don't think it's helpful to even to determine whether or not a crisis exists. But it is certainly outrageous to suggest that CARICOM does not need to intervene because there's no violence.
You heard both views, gentlemen. Mr. Burke.
Well, I share the view as well that CARICOM does not need to intervene only where there's violence. At the end of the day, We are independent nations, but we are seeking to go forward as a united, integrated unit. We're talking about a common economic space. We're talking about an integrated region. And for that to happen, there must be some stability, there must be some peace. These are preconditions for development. And so if there's a problem in one of these countries, I think it's in the interest of the other partners to ensure that that problem is resolved in an amicable and sensible way that will redound to the benefit of the entire region. So I do believe that if there are problems of this kind, the CARICOM leaders should meet and have a discussion around it. It is always a ticklish issue because, of course, you know, one is talking here about interference in internal affairs.
Aren't we carrying that too far? Because let us face it, I mean, that's a cop-out as far as I'm concerned. Let me give my view on that, okay? And why I say that is that, whether we like it or not, international organizations that are not even governments are making rules for our countries by passing our sovereignty.
Absolutely.
So what is this nonsense about interference in domestic affairs?
Of course. I do agree with you. I think the issue really is going to be more not whether to intervene, but how to intervene.
Okay.
In other words, through what means and mechanisms, by what modalities will they seek to engage the key players in St. Kitts?
I was in St. Vincent in 2000, and we had an impasse in St. Vincent similarly, right? Which the current chairman of CARICOM led. And there was an intervention by CARICOM.
In Guyana also?
In Guyana, correctly.
Yes.
Mr. Browne, your views on that? The question of intervention?
No. So I think I missed it completely.
No, the question of intervention, we're talking about CARICOM. I was suggesting to you that you probably listen on your television if you're struggling with the link.
Oh, I see. Okay. But the noise, anyway, if I got it right, I do accept that CARICOM obviously has a role to play to ensure that you know, there's fairness in the dispensation of justice at the national level. I don't think that they should remain quiet on these issues. I know generally among the prime ministers, they have the issue of committee among them, and they generally try to stay out of the fray. But I'm quite sure that where we see abuses, that we all as stakeholders, CARICOM, and even as citizens, then within the region, we all have an obligation to speak out against any injustice that may exist within the respective member states. But I think in essence, we have been very insular, obviously not very concerned about regional issues. And we, in many instances too, do not say much about local issues, much less to address the regional ones.
Exactly.
So perhaps, sorry?
No, I agree with you on that, 100%.
Okay. Right. So again, I do accept that CARICOM certainly has a role to play. I don't know if it's the case of you know, not being independent, that they rely on these governments for subsistence, and that maybe they're intimidated. They feel that if they take certain positions, that perhaps certain governments may be punitive against them. And I know that there's some who believe too that there are judges who fall in that position. But let me make the point here that in as much as I accept that we need to take steps to strengthen the judiciary, and I'm just dealing with a point that was raised earlier, I can't say I know that there's any widespread perversion of justice based on partisan support. What tends to be happening within the region is that whoever loses cries foul. And almost invariably, the court finds itself in the middle. I mean, today in Antigua and Barbuda, the present prime minister and other members of his party, even though the decisions have not come out as yet, they are already berating the court. And if I am to agree that with the notion that the court does not rule against the government, then it stands to reason that we will lose the two litigations tomorrow. I can't say I share that level of pessimism, and I
but
remain
hold on.
optimistic.
The duration of the court is because of the length of time the government is saying that the court is taking too long. Isn't there some merit in that? And generally speaking, in the region, there are other people in the system, in the legal system, who feels that justice takes too long sometimes.
Again, you have to look at it in the context of the resource constraints. I think that based on the limited resources, that they've been doing a relatively good job.
But shouldn't some things be fast-tracked because of their nature?
I know, but again, you also have to take into consideration the fact that they have serious constraints, resource constraints. They have to cover several territories. I mean, it's only a few of them. They have very small numbers. And insofar as this litigation is concerned, they would have delivered their judgment within about 2 months.
Okay.
There are other litigations in which they have taken in excess of a year. So in the context of others, even the electoral petitions that we had in 2009, they took about 18 months to be litigated. So that I do not think that the 2 month period was unduly long.
Okay.
I think they're making an issue about it because it went beyond the dissolution of Parliament. But the Prime Minister has to take responsibility for that issue. I mean, he should have ensured that there was sufficient time for the matter to be fully litigated. And he was forewarned in an event because rightfully, in terms of the convention, the elections should have been held since March. And that being the case, there's no way that you would have had enough time in any event. But again, I just want to suggest that, insofar as the court is concerned, that perhaps we need to treat with them with a little more civility. We tend to be...
Well, nobody here has been anything but civil with them. I beg to
accept that. I'm not
to establish
in general terms. Yes, I absolutely agree that we need to ensure that we treat with the court with more civility. Ultimately, if the High Court gives a bad decision, you can appeal to the appeals court. If you get a perverted decision there, you can go to the Privy Council. But there's this knee-jerk reaction that whichever party, be the opposition or the governing party, that gets a decision, that they tend to berate the court, and not only that, to tend to speak against the whole issue of the CCJ. I mean, you find, for instance, that they approbate and reprobate. When they win, it's fine. When they lose, then they have all manner of evil to say. But again, I do accept that there is need for strengthening. But at the same time, let us treat the court with some civility and some maturity.
Okay, so let's come back to the total issue of intervention. We agree that somebody shouldn't, but I want to know one thing. Is the view of CARICOM representative simply of the chairman's view?
No, and certainly...
No, it shouldn't be, or is it?
Well, the chairman ought to be reflecting a consensual view of CARICOM, because that is what the chair does, preside over. Clearly within CARICOM, we know that the views that Ralph expressed, in my view, were personal to him, and even at a variance with his own intellectual thinking.
You're talking about Dr. Gonzalez, right?
Dr. Gonzalez. For clearly, the very day that Ralph was making... Dr. Gonzalez, Comrade Ralph, as he would prefer me to call him, Comrade Ralph, the Comrade leader, was making that position. The Prime Minister of Grenada was coming immediately after to say to him, Grenada will speak. That voice then is not reflective of the view of the Grenada which I lead.
But that's the problem. You have so many countries.
Yes.
And Grenada has to step aside and make an independent statement. What happened to all the other leaders in the region?
Well, part of it is part of the problem which Gaston Browne spoke to, that over time you could develop a body system among leadership, and people believe that the correct way in large measure is to speak to you privately. But that denies the rest of the Caribbean region to get a proper understanding where leadership stands on fundamental matters. And that is critical, because indeed the matter is so clear that none can have a contrary view, that other than what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis is wrong. In a letter dated the 13th of August, 2013, Ralph Gonzalez, Comrade leader, he has so much invited us to call him Ralph. Prime Minister Gonzalez said to the leader of the opposition, listen, I have great unease that in St. Kitts and Nevis, the representativeness principle, which requires that the government should have majority support, is no longer in place.
Okay, we have to take a break. And the break comes with the question to you. Do you think the other governments are staying quiet because when they do similarly, they don't want anybody to talk to them? That's a question for a return on this edition of Time to Face the Facts. And we'll also return with Prime Minister Dr. Denzil Douglas's view as to when elections will take place. Don't go away.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place. CARICOM, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel and festivals. Advertise on the CARICOM platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries, and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area, and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CARICOM, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
When you send money with Western Union, you're sending a smile, a gift, a hello, or even support. It's a fast and convenient way to stay connected with loved ones around the world, or even across the Caribbean. From any of our convenient agent locations, depend on Western Union to send your money quickly and reliably. Western Union, moving money for better.
Agents in Grenada, Rennick Thompson and Company, with locations in Grenville, Sauterres, Guave, Grenada, the Carenage, Bruce Street, and Carriacou.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
To thrive in today's dynamic business environment, you need the right partner. Digicel Business is that partner, offering you the flexibility you need to flourish. Our scalable solutions will increase your effectiveness and efficiency while enabling workforce mobility. Large or small, you can't hide from potential threats to your business. With a partner protecting your interests, you can focus on productivity. It's amazing where the right partnership can develop and how far it can take you. Contact us today. Digicel Business, complete solutions for your needs.
And those who believe that creating an environment and an atmosphere of instability is going to bring international attention to the political situation in St. Kitts and Nevis, and thus it would appear cause a premature call of the elections, well, obviously they're making a mistake.
Welcome back to this edition of Time to Face the Facts. And please note, the telephone lines will be open in this segment, so if we'd like you to give us a call on this edition of Time to Face the Facts. The Prime Minister says no.
Well, the Prime Minister is not somebody to whom we pay great attention to.
You mean he's a Prime Minister?
The people in St. Kitts and Nevis have come to expect the lowest of the low from the Prime Minister. And that is where the reality is.
That's a nice comment.
You hear, but it's a truthful comment. Because when it is that the Prime Minister doesn't treat the Parliament with respect, when it is that the Prime Minister believes that even the Governor-General must be subordinated and subjugated to his own whims and fancies, then you see that we are not operating in the democratic sphere and in the democratic tradition that we would want. And the Prime Minister has successfully debased almost every institution. The Parliament can't meet to debate a motion of no confidence. The supervisor of election becomes a party hack. The Governor-General, according to him, can give him no direction, or else he will take people to the streets. Well, what kind of society do we live in?
But
and look at the precedents elsewhere.
We talked earlier about the court, but you have been blamed, saying that you acted, and Dr. Gonsalves also has this view, that you acted prematurely. Instead of acting politically, by taking political action, you went and took judicial action, and that was a mistake in terms of tactic.
That is coming out of ignorance.
Oh.
Ignorance. And the Prime Minister of St. Vincent ought to be better advised. The Prime Minister, if he had done the research, would have been aware that we went to the court 113 days after the government had failed to deliver and bring in the motion of no confidence to the Parliament, had passed all kinds of other bits of legislation, including increasing the number of senators in the Parliament to allow it to be able to get a budget too. And
that's the point. And that's the point, that because of the constitutional nature and configuration in St. Kitts, the Prime Minister could simply step around it because the unicameral system allows him to have more votes and still carry on the government.
Yes, but it goes then to the principle, and I go back again to the contradiction of Ralph. In Ralph's letter 13th August, Ralph outlined what he considered, the Prime Minister outlined what he considered to be the cardinal core principles. And he said that what ought to happen when a government does not any longer have a majority of elected members, it must do three things. One, it must resign and make way for the calling of fresh elections. Two, it must allow the motion of no confidence. And thirdly, adhere to any advice given by the head of state to wit the Governor General. And so we are saying that this is what is required now. And that ought to be the consistent message that Prime Minister of St. Vincent must bring. That in the context of what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis, it is no longer a question that he feels uneasy. It is that for too long, and in that letter he said 6 months was too long for that matter to be unresolved, and that he expected that there would be a resolution by way of an impending general election.
Who said all of that?
Ralph Gonsalves, in a letter dated 13th August 2013 to the Honorable Arnhem Eustace, Leader of the Opposition. We are now 16 months. So when in St. Vincent, in March 10th, 11th or thereabout, when he was making statements about the situation in St. Kitts and whether you should intervene, he was going against the core cardinal principles as he, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, outlined them in August. And that is why we are saying it was the expediency of the politics that the Prime Minister saw the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Arnhem Eustace, as championing a cause. So, and he wanted to name that opportunity.
So what was it?
And so
tell us a bit more about
himself.
the genesis of that letter, because
that letter came about, and I have a copy. That letter came about because we had written to heads of government in 2013, I think it was, around July, just before the heads meeting in July, indicating to them that we wanted the matter of the subversion of democracy in St. Kitts be put on the table. That letter was circulated by CARICOM Secretariat to heads of government, and we also had circulated it to leaders of the opposition within the region. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition in St. Vincent and the Grenadines then wrote to the Prime Minister seeking to agitate his mind in the context of what was proposed to be done in relation to the St. Kitts matter. And he therefore wrote back a long thesis, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And in it he outlined again, and I'm using his words, the core eternal principles of good governance. And there were three actions that were required in the context of the cardinal core eternal principles of good governance and democratic tradition. Call fresh elections, resign, allow the motion of no confidence, and thirdly, heed any advice given by the head of state pertinent to the matter. Well, what you have heard our Prime Minister illegitimate, as he now is saying, is that the Governor General can't give me no advice, and I will not resign, and I will not allow the motion of no confidence. So how can you reconcile these failings with the core eternal principles outlined by the Prime Minister 6 months when the motion of no confidence was being pending, and then with what he said in March? And to go back to the whole question of the court, we went to the court because we were forced to. There is no precedent in relation to motion of no confidence being held for that long.
Okay, we have a call from Grenada. Caller, please. Thank you for calling.
Yeah, good night to you and your guests, and I want to give my full support to the Honorable V. Nazim.V in terms of what he said when you, Mr. George, said to him, well, yeah, you as a Minister of Finance in relation to the economy, and I want to say that what Senator Burke said tonight is the truth. So just called to confirm.
But that's not the substantive issue tonight.
Yes, so he gets, no, but I'm not finished. I want to say to the doctor, Timothy, is his name Mr. Harris?
Yes.
You know, this is an economic crisis, right? Everybody's facing problems and all kinds of things. You know, I want to support the government of St. Kitts, because I think you are a parliamentarian. You and you all should be fighting for the people of St. Kitts and your constituencies to see if you could have some betterment of life for the, you're all only fighting, you're all leader and get, this is not the time to be doing such a thing. The environment is as it is now. The economic situation is not conducive, and you should be bringing things together, trying to focus on the constituency and not creating this chaos. Okay. A shame on you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, ma'am. That's one view. All right. Certainly. Remember, folks, you can call us. The numbers are on the screen, and we'll be taking your calls in this segment. What I want us to do now, we kind of heard Antigua, St. Kitts, Grenada. Although there's some... Well, we haven't heard the end of Grenada. No, we have to... But, no, go ahead. Say what...
There's so much to be said about Grenada.
Well, that's the point. Each country has a lot to say.
Even the one issue that we need to speak about, I'd like to finish it, which is this. Go ahead. After the Governor General got rid of the office of the Supervisor of Elections, an acting supervisor was then appointed. He was in office. The person who is the system administrator running the IT system, trained by the OECS in that office. The government then said, we're getting rid of that guy. The acting supervisor says, there's no reason to get rid of this guy. He's trained, he's the person that we know, he's the best person that we have. Please leave him there. The government said, he's going anyway.
Call from St. Kitts. Callers get precedence. So calls from St. Kitts. Caller, go ahead, please.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Go right ahead, sir.
I just want to emphasize the point and further what Dr. Harris said concerning the Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis. The Prime Minister said clearly that he needs to have his budget because the budget is more than important than anything other. And he said shortly thereafter he will call the motion of no confidence. It's going for 2 years now. So the Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis gone against his own word and then using the court after the opposition had no choice other than to seek redress in the court. He is now using the court. And you know what the court says? There's nothing stopping the Speaker of the National Assembly to deal with the issue of the motion of no confidence. So there, Dr. Douglas lied to the people, deliberately lied to the people of St. Kitts Nevis because he...
Okay, thank you. We would like to also entertain that kind of language about deliberately lying. Okay, but we're going to take a break at this point in time. You're viewing this edition of Time to Face the Facts. We'll be right back in just a moment.
If you want the eyes and ears of your customers, then there's only one place, CARICOM, the authentic channel for all things Caribbean, bringing you Caribbean news, Caribbean sports, Caribbean entertainment, Caribbean travel and festivals. Advertise on the CARICOM platform, reaching across the Caribbean in over 21 countries, and now in the U.S. market on Cablevision in the New York tri-state area, and coming soon to Canada and the United Kingdom. Email us at sales@cmccaribbean.com. CARICOM, the eyes and ears of the Caribbean.
If you are serious about business, then log on and participate in Business Advantage. Every Monday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Log on to www.niceradio.info. Business Advantage inspires you to believe that the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Business Advantage with host Jerry George, mentoring the next generation of Caribbean entrepreneurs. 8 to 10 p.m. Mondays on www.niceradio.info. For further information, email caribbeaninformationhub@gmail.com. Like the Business Advantage Facebook page or call 1-784-456-5967 to participate.
Welcome back, and remember we're still taking your calls, but let me at this point apologize for the language used by the previous caller about blatant lying. Please, we will not accept that kind of language on this show. But, gentlemen, you know, we have heard the three cases, and we can't go exhaustively into them all. I think what is clear is the question asked in the pretext of this program. Is parliamentary democracy under threat? We've looked at in three cases about the situation in terms of the Governor General. We'll look at situations in terms of the Constitution, and we'll look at situations in terms of how the judiciary has become involved. Let's bring in Mr. Browne. Mr. Browne?
Hi, go right ahead.
Yes, we have to now look, we have the three cases on the table, and this, oh, we do have a call, so we have a call from St. Vincent. Let's take that call first, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Browne. Caller, thanks for calling.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Here we have democracy in St. Kitts that's under siege. Denzel Douglas is refusing to accept the rule of law. He's refusing to have a motion of no confidence being debated in Parliament. It cannot get any clearer than that. Here is the question for the panelists. What is CARICOM doing to address this matter? Because I want to believe that CARICOM is responsible for policing good governance in the Caribbean. How do we address this problem at CARICOM? Has CARICOM made any intervention? Because from my basic knowledge, CARICOM has been prepared to intervene in Ukraine, in Venezuela, in other areas outside of the stratosphere. But in St. Kitts, in your own backyard, they're not prepared to intervene.
But caller,
they're not prepared to make a statement.
Caller, we played a clip earlier where the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who's the current chairman of CARICOM, says that law and order has not been broken down, therefore CARICOM will not intervene.
Well, that's a matter of interpretation.
Interpretation, okay.
Because here you've gone to the Governor General. The Governor General is responsible for dealing with these matters. You've written to the Governor General that according to our Westminster system, is he who controls the majority. So then where do we go from here? It is quite clear that Denzel Douglas, the Honorable Denzel Douglas, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, does not have any position as it stands right now with regards to democracy as a Prime Minister, as a legitimate Prime Minister.
Thank you,
Here
God.
we have prime ministerial dictatorship acting out broadly in front of us in St. Kitts, in Antigua. What is CARICOM doing about these matters?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for your question, sir. That call, I think, has been reflecting some of the discussion. But I think we had gone to Mr. Browne, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, as I say, let's talk about some solutions now. How do we take this forward? First of all, need to be looking at a common constitution for these countries. If we look at just involved here, we have the OECS. Should we be having something of a common constitution?
Well, there's nothing wrong with a common constitution. I mean, we're moving towards CARICOM integration, and there's a need for us to harmonize our laws, and clearly even to harmonize our respective constitutions, and to make sure that they could deal with the idiosyncrasies.
Remember your next thought, because we have a caller. We usually give the callers preference, okay? So remember your next thought. Caller from St. Kitts, go ahead, please.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the call. Where Dr. Gonzalez is wrong, and very wrong, is that while he's looking at the breakdown of law and order on the streets, there is a terrible breakdown of law and order at Government House, at the Parliament, at the Cabinet, and as Dr. Harris correctly says, serially at the Constitution. I mean, he could take 2 nights to discuss the constitutional breaches. And where you have institutional breakdown of law and order, that is far worse than people on the streets picketing and making noise. And Dr. Gonzalez, I hope and I wish for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that these words, this position he has taken, doesn't come to haunt him in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Back to you, Mr. Browne.
Right, so I was making the point that I agree with the harmonization of our respective constitutions, insofar as it does not negate whatever peculiar issues that must be addressed based on the national needs. Now, I also believe too that the focus must be on literally tightening the various loopholes that exist within our various constitutions. And I'll give you a case in point. We know that a constitutional term is or parliamentary term is for 5 years. Now, we have a situation in Antigua and Barbuda in which the Parliament had its first sitting after the 2009 general elections, which were held March 12, 2009, 7 weeks later. So the first sitting was on April 27, 2009. So whereas the entire country was actually looking forward to have elections on March 12th of 2014, the government argued that its term was not completed because the first sitting of Parliament took place on the 27th of April. And in the strict interpretation of the Constitution, that is so. But in terms of the intent of the Constitution, clearly that is not so, because the framers of the Constitution would not have anticipated a government taking as long as 7 weeks to convene Parliament after it would have won an election.
Mr. Browne, you just went to a point I want to think. You talk about the framers of the Constitution. It seems that when these constitutions were framed, the people who did them had a different kind of persons in mind in governance. What would you say to that?
I accept, and that is why I'm making the point about tightening these loopholes, because you cannot leave it to the discretion of prime ministers and other officials, because almost invariably they abuse these constitutional provisions for their own partisan gain. But you are right that the framers clearly would have expected that you would have had individuals who would conform and certainly keep within the spirit and intent of the Constitution. But as far as they're concerned, they are literally, wherever possible, exploiting the literal interpretation in order to promote their own personal and certainly their own partisan agendas. So clearly it would appear as though that there needs to be a greater level of maturity among our leaders, among our politicians, and for us to not only look at the literal issues within the Constitution, but to go beyond those and to look at the intent, and also to respect the intent, and also to respect the conventions which obviously would have formed part of our jurisprudence and clearly would have the force of law.
Here's the question.
And that's certainly enforceable.
Here's a question, and I want it for all of you gentlemen. You are in opposition at this point. You have these lofty views on these issues. Mr. Browne, you said that if the elections took place, the current administration would not make it back into governance.
Correct.
How would you, and gentlemen, all of you, including especially you, Mr. Harris, how would you gentlemen fix these problems? Because it's one thing, I've lived long enough to see that people in opposition have these views and then they get into governance and their supporters literally egg them on to leave things as is. Would you be doing that, gentlemen? Any of you? All of you?
Well, if I may, I want to say quite clearly that we have embarked upon a platform for constitutional reform. And one of the things that brought team unity together, three political parties with distinct philosophies determined to put them aside, and out of three became one, in furtherance of a new chapter of governance in St. Kitts and Nevis. Because you see, governance determines at the end of the day the quality of life that we will enjoy, the freedoms that we will have, both socially and economically. Governance is wrapped up with prosperity, and we are offering the people of St. Kitts and Nevis what we call a prosperity agenda. Constitutional reform is going to be a critical plank. And the point which Mr. Browne was making about the need to tighten what appear now to be loopholes, for example, in our context, the lack of a time frame for the motion of no confidence that has been used as an excuse. It has been addressed appropriately in the judgment where the judge says that is not a problem. The fact is you have enough traditions and principles, and where it is silent, we move to the UK tradition. We will introduce, for example, term limits for the holder of the office of the Prime Minister.
Stay right there, because I'm coming to Mr. Burke on that one. The NDC, in opposition, said that one of the things they would do was to introduce term limits. In fact, I can say so about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Prime Minister Gonzalez said that he would do the same thing. In opposition, Mr. Burke, you all had a whole term. There was nothing that addressed that issue.
Well, that is not a fair comment.
What is
the fact of the matter is that we started a process of constitutional reform. We retained the services of Dr. McIntosh, now deceased, who was the Dean of University Law School at Cave Hill, and he did a tremendous amount of work putting forward such a proposal, a whole dossier on constitutional reform. It is that document which this government is trying to build on at the moment. So it is not fair to say that we have not done anything about it. We are determined to do something about it. I want to say, if I may say so myself, that the National Democratic Congress is a party that has as its core values good governance.
We have a call from your homeland, so let's take the call first. Caller from Grenada, thanks for calling.
Yes, good evening.
Could you speak up a little bit for us, please?
Good evening to listeners, viewers. I want to say I'm very disappointed in the program because I am not hearing anything at all about the people. The citizens are at the heart of the Constitution. And I have not heard any contributions from any of the panelists talking about how do we get the citizens more involved in the governance of their country. Clearly the citizens in all of the countries you're talking about have issues and would like to be able to take some action. So besides the street demonstrations and those kinds of stuff, how do we reform our institutions and create mechanisms so that the citizens can call those who they have elected to office to account?
Caller, a couple of things. We pointed out in St. Kitts, the Evangelical Association, the Bar Association, the Chamber of Commerce, who represent the non-governmental organizations, had a say. And at this point in the program, we're now looking at solutions. And so that's part of the program. You could call and make that point yourself, that you want to see more of that happen.
And I just want to raise one concern.
Sure.
I have raised it before. I'm getting an opportunity to raise it at another level. There are serious conflicts of interest. I find some of them very unacceptable. For example, His Excellency Ambassador Wendell Lawrence, who is one of the chief proponents of the Citizenship by Investment program in St. Kitts, was a member of the Regional Legal and Judicial Services Commission, which chooses the judges of the CCJ. He is a member of the Board of Governors of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. To my simple mind, that represents a serious conflict, a serious and unacceptable conflict of interest, and in my mind, has also the ability to create questions of the perception of integrity of these institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And caller, you certainly have really just hit the nail on the head on some of the issues.
And it takes us now to a very critical question, which I think in the case of St. Kitts, you looked at it, but it raises this question of what is the role and responsibility of the citizen as well, exactly. Not only their rights, you see. In other words, should the citizens be sitting and watching their governments doing what they're doing, breaking the Constitution? In our case, the Prime Minister of Grenada and the Governor General on 2 occasions appointed as the acting Attorney General an engineer who has absolutely no training in law, has never been a lawyer, has had nothing to do with the law, but put him to act as the Governor General of the country. As the Attorney General of the country on 2 occasions. The Bar Association said nothing, the NGO community said nothing, the business community said nothing, the trade union said nothing. All right?
But that's the problem right there. If those people don't speak, do you think the masses will speak?
Right? Everybody knows that you cannot be made the chief engineer if you're not an engineer. No, you cannot be made the Attorney General if you're not an Attorney General. So there is a right, but there is a responsibility.
Yeah, but that is where the loopholes we're talking about in the Constitution.
The Constitution has no loophole in Grenada in that respect.
It doesn't, okay.
The Constitution of Grenada says there shall be, Section 70 of the Constitution, there shall be an Attorney General of Grenada who will be the principal legal advisor of the government. The Legal Profession Act says that you cannot be a lawyer unless you're called to the bar, and unless you cannot hold yourself out as a lawyer unless you have gone through and have a legal education certificate or is called to the bar to practice law. Yeah? So it means that a person cannot pretend to be a lawyer. It's illegal.
But it says a legal advisor.
Right.
Is it only lawyers
can provide legal advice?
Okay.
Yes. In other words, when something like this happens, the citizens have to speak up.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because that's the problem. On a program earlier on the same, on Time to Face the Fact, we looked at what has been happening, and I think practically all of the political parties are guilty of this, is that the political parties have become so powerful and people have become so loyal to the political parties that the political parties really is what holding sway. People know it's wrong. Well, but because they want to support their particular political party, they keep quiet.
I think it's more than that.
What is it?
Surely in Grenada's case. It is not merely a case of wanting to support. I think that a culture of fear and intimidation.
Some of that I think is just assumed. I'm sorry. Some people just want...
Well, some of it...
People want to say they are afraid because they do not want to take a stand. That is my view.
Well, some of it might be imagined, but some of it is real.
I agree. Yeah? Some of it.
If in these conditions, a person believes that if I were to speak up against this, I'm going to lose my job, they will not do it. Or my son is going to lose his job. They will not do it.
Mr. Burke, here's what. The people who fought the colonial masters really placed themselves many times across the divide. But they didn't have anything to lose?
No, well, I'm not saying that they have nothing to lose. I'm saying there is clearly a change in thinking.
Well, that
in
is
other words,
our problem.
It is not simply a question of an excuse. There are people who are punished because of their political views.
But what I'm saying, the people of or foreparents took stands against might that was bigger.
And
what happened to us? Have we simply become this because we don't want to take responsibility?
That's the question we need to look at.
We don't all lose a job, we don't all lose a children thing. But let me wrap this come up quickly because we already run out of time. The question of changing the constitution. Let me give the situation in St. Vincent. In St. Vincent, there was this move to change the constitution. We want to seem to do this as a complete package. You look to the United States. If there's amendment to be made in one aspect, they make it and they move along. Isn't that where the real problem is? Because I believe in St. Vincent, if the various elements of the Constitution were voted upon singly, it would have been dealt with differently. How does Grenada plan to do it?
Well, I think from the suggestions that have come forward so far from the committee, they want to take about 5 or 6 issues which they consider to be non-controversial at this moment and put those forward. They have to do principally with the accession to the CCJ. They have to do with the establishment of an electoral and boundaries commission. They have to do with term limits. They have a few things, about 5 or 6 things.
That is fine. I could take that.
Well, that has its benefits and its downside as well.
Like everything, I guess. Yeah, so. But Mr. Browne, let me come with you because we have to move towards wrapping up. Mr. Browne?
Go right ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Well, we're kind of running out of things, but we want some concrete solutions to be put on the table this evening as to how we move forward in fixing this. The caller says we need to get more involvement from the citizenry. What's your view?
Well, I do agree. I think the region in general needs to move towards transparent, more accountable governance, and certainly more participatory governance in which the citizenry will have more say in the governance of the country. And even in terms of how we staff various boards and certainly constitutional bodies, I think that we have to go beyond the whole issue of appointing party supporters or activists, and to make sure that we have individuals who can dispense of their responsibilities in an efficient way, an effective way, and certainly in a non-partisan way. As I said, when you look at all of the various constitutional institutions that are responsible to preside over our democracy, the Boundaries Commission, the Electoral Commission, almost invariably they literally those positions are filled with party activists.
So the question is, as I let you come out for your last statement, the question is, do you think parliamentary democracy is threatened?
I think it's threatened. Again, there has to be some institutional strengthening, starting with constitutional reform. Even the supporting laws as well must be strengthened. When you look at the whole issue of the governance framework within the Caribbean, that is a fundamental issue. There's some fundamental weaknesses, and obviously those weaknesses are being exploited, not only for political gains in terms of winning elections.
Thank you very much. We have to move on because we're coming to wrap right now. Mr. Burke, you have your wrapping up statements. And
yes, I want to say that I am firmly of the view that democracy in the Caribbean, surely in Grenada, is under serious threat at the moment. We can point you to several violations of the Constitution itself, the constitutional provisions. We can point you to what in effect appears to be a usurpation of the functions of the Governor General by the Prime Minister. In effect, without saying so and without being direct about it, it is quite clear that the Governor General is not acting independently. Yes? So in that sense, I'm saying a usurpation. The third thing is the attacks seem to be directed largely at the electoral office. And that is fundamentally troubling because that is where elections are decided. In our democracy, the electoral office is the engine room of democracy. Yeah. And the voter registration system really are the engines. So if somebody is throwing sand in the engine, it's not going to work.
So the question again, is parliamentary democracy
seriously under threat? And I'm saying to you, yes, I am firmly of that view. The attack on the institutions, I want to say that the key stakeholders have to speak up against what is going on.
Thank you very much. You've really got very little time left. Mr. Harris.
Just to say, I think that we have all agreed from the instances that we have quoted within each of the jurisdictions, some of them are replicated. We could go on to talk about persons in St. Kitts being encouraged to register in constituencies in which do not live. We could talk about the padding of the electoral list, etc. All of those things point to a subversion of democracy, which we must correct.
Thank you very much. Ladies, gentlemen, all, this has been the anniversary edition of Time to Face the Facts. With me this evening has been Dr. Timothy Harris from St. Kitts, Dr. Nazim.V from Grenada, and on Google Hangout, Mr. Gaston Browne, the leader of the opposition in Antigua. Thank you all for viewing this program, and for those of you who participated by calling, thanks very much. We'll see you again. So long.
Thank you.